Yo, what's going on, Epic 7 fam? Pat here, back with another video. They just released a World Arena Triumph Season infographic this morning over on Stove, and I figured we'd read through it together kind of as like a belated accompanying piece to my account review for the Emperor Season finish for Triumph Season. So we can kind of like go through and see a couple things. I've already read through this, skimmed through this a little bit, so there are a couple of talking points I do want to actually hit, but again, I figured this would just be fun for us to go through together, give you some of my insight, as well as take a look at some of Smilegate and Super Creative's insight as well. So let's just jump into it here. Let's talk about it, if you will. Hello, heirs. This is Epic 7. Following our previous announcement of the Conquest Season's infographic, we would like to present the Triumph Season's infographics. First and foremost, we would like to express our gratitude to all heirs for their continued support and enjoyment of World Arena. This season saw a major shift in the meta compared to previous seasons in 2022 due to the introduction of new heroes and balance adjustments, which had a significant impact on the game. We observed a major shift in heroes that many players have been using for an extended period of time. Hua Young, who had a strong presence in previous seasons, had a significant decrease in her numbers after undergoing balance adjustments, while Apocalypse Rabi, who had high first pick and pick rates due to her high versatility, saw a drop in her numbers with the introduction of Savior Aiden. So yes, this is fairly obvious. Savior Aiden is a character who is kind of like a Little Queen Charlotte-esque character that everyone has access to, which means everyone has access to a pseudo counter to this character. And then they just gutted my girl Hua Young, so obviously, yeah, her numbers went down. Continuing on. As a result, the stall team composition began using Unbound Knight ROL and Savior Aiden as their primary heroes. To counter the threat of Savior Aiden and Zio, the speed contesting composition began incorporating ranger heroes instead of heroes like Ran and Sid. Heroes with stealth abilities such as Spectre Tenebria gained popularity as they could evade lethal skills by heroes with single target abilities. We want to take a closer look at the numbers for pre-ban, first pick, and picks respectively in more detail. Today's infographic is based on data from the Triumph and Conquest seasons, including an analysis of all battles above the Champion League. So here you go. You can see what their definitions are for things. Most notably here under pre-ban, for specialty change heroes, they will be counted separately from the original heroes. This feels kind of lazy, honestly. Nobody's really playing a 3-star character without a specialty change at the champion or above level because the stats are just too low. A lot of people like to shorthand and just pre-ban the 3-star. So, for example, you just banned ROL instead of Unbound Knight ROL because by banning ROL, you also ban Unbound Knight ROL. I don't think there's ever been a situation in the past like Clury had that situation when she was super broken, I think, where people would ban Falcon or Clury, and then people would take Clury just for the S3. So that is a thing that can happen. I think they should just have combined the rates, and then that would have given us a more accurate picture. So when we take a look at a character like Unbound Knight Arwell in this video, the numbers might actually be lower in terms of like the pre-ban or pick rates than you're probably used to seeing. So let's take a look at the hero pick rate. Number 1, pre-ban. The most pre-banned characters, top 20. Lua with a staggering 66.7%. So in 2/3 of all games, Lua is pre-ban. That is pretty telling. If anything, that should say a lot to the Epic 7 balance team. We could still see Bellion here at 42.3%. People really just don't like Shackles of Souls. A lot of people who play aggressively really want to use Ancient Book. They really want to leverage that artifact because it's super, super broken. So I can understand that. Conquer Aloys is another one that's not super surprising. Same with Angel of Light, Angelica. And then Zio, obviously, the majority of the higher tier players are very aggressive. And Zio completely dismantles that strategy. So that's also not a super big surprise. So we can see the exact percentages here on the table. You can compare them to the previous season. So in the previous season, Hua Young had a 53.7% pre-ban rate. And that was good enough. That, along with her win rate, was good enough for her to receive a balance adjustment, aka a nerf. So Lua is chilling here with a significantly higher pre-ban percentage than Hua Young was before she ended up getting gutted. So if Hua-Young was a problem because her pre-ban rate exceeded 50% amongst other factors, yeah, they're probably going to have to end up looking at Lua. Lua is the most commonly pre-banned hero during the Triumph season with a 67% ban rate compared to the Conquest season. The percentage of the most commonly pre-banned hero increased while the pre-ban rate of other heroes decreased overall. This suggests that players prioritize containing Lua, a hero who could effectively increase the cooldown of the enemy team by pre-banning her instead of other heroes like Hua-Young, Conquer Aloysius, AOL, and Ran, who were frequently pre-banned in the previous season. So now we can see the trend over time. This is what the top 10 pre-bans in the early stage means. So this means at the beginning of the season. So basically like right before Christmas, like right after Thanksgiving, right before Christmas when the season started, you can see Lua had a 66.6% ban rate. So not too much different. In the middle of the season, 67.4%. So it actually increased. And you can see in the late stage at the very end of the season, a 66.4% increase. So that suggests that there was no counterplay to this character introduced across the entire season. And the only time she wasn't pre-banned were probably by people who were trying to leverage her as a first pick. So this suggests, again, Lua really needs some kind of adjustment, really needs to be looked at because no character should have this high of a ban rate. Even in the previous seasons, like I said, Hua-Young was 53.7. And if you look at the previous season, even Conquer Aloysius, who was like the second highest win rate hero last season, was 48.3%. So yeah, that again should suggest that Lua definitely needs some kind of look at. So now we look at the first pick, the all stages. So basically this is the aggregate score across the entire season. That would be Unbound Knight ROL is the most commonly picked first pick character at 24%. And that lines up with, if you've watched my account review, that lines up with my experiences pretty much perfectly. Unbound Knight ROL was my go-to first pick as opposed to Mediator Kowaric, who you can see here only has a 4.6% first pick rate. Because first picking Mediator Kowaric signals that you are trying to play turn 2, you are trying to play standard, which opens you up to aggression and a lot of really scary counter picks like Faithless Litica. Picking Unbound Knight Arwell doesn't have nearly the same problems because you don't have to just stick only with Unbound Knight Arwell. You could go for a very aggressive strategy. Mediator Quirk doesn't really do anything in very fast-paced aggressive games, whereas Unbound Knight Arwell, because she has built-in Helag Lance and the damage mitigation will at least provide something. Her S3 is also a full strip and a single target stun, so it can be used to win a game in a pinch when things are very, very tight. Mediator Quirk has nothing like that. So you can see here, we now have the actual win rates. The highest win rate hero of the season, right here, 53.1%, is Unbound Knight Arwell. Not surprising in the least. If you've looked at previous seasons, we have Fallen Cecilia here, right here on the Conquest season, was the second highest win rate hero last season at 53.4%. Basically, everyone took all their gear off Fallen Cecilia and moved it onto Unbound Knight Arwell because she's just a better mitigation source. That is pretty much my experience from my account review video. And you can see it reflected here in the data. So yeah, it's not too surprising. For everybody who's saying like Arwell is kind of broken, again, like I said, Fallen Cecilia had the same win rate last season, actually a better win rate, even if only slightly, and kind of maintained that entire win rate for the entirety of the World Arena season. So nothing has really changed. It's pretty much the same situations you were picking Fallen Cecilia in. You are now picking Unbound Knight Arwen, and the quality of those games is probably going to be exactly the same. So like, it is literally like a 1-for-1 for the most part. Bellion was the previous highest win rate from last season, in case you were wondering. And notice that she only had a 20% ban rate last time. Where is she at now? Bellion. Did she not make the list? Oh, this is first picks. Okay. So she was a first pick last season. That's why. Okay. I see. So other ones that we can look at here with high win rates. Conquer Aloysius here, 52%, as opposed to 51.7% from last time. And you can see first pick rate has increased a little bit here. But overall, Conquer Aloysius is still just as good as she was previously. Apocalypse Ravi is now the 12th most picked. So only first picked in about 1% of games. Her win rate is 52.7%, as opposed to a 51.9% win rate from previous seasons. So again, not much has changed. If you remember in my account review, I was worried that Apocalypse Robbie had fallen off, and I was worried that I was giving people bad advice, and came back around and was like, no, she's still broken. Again, the numbers really suggest that that is exactly the case. Like, win rate is actually better, and that's because you're picking her in spots where you know the character is actually going to be super impactful. So that's not really a surprise, pretty much in the same ballpark. So let's see, is there any other characters are surprising? I think 52.1% for Savior Aiden is actually very surprising. That means that this character is probably stronger than even I anticipated. Like, people were complaining about this character at the start of the season. I didn't really play a ton during the start of the season. I only really played late in the season. And for me, Savior Aiden was good, but not like exceptional. The higher than average win rate for a DPS kind of really says a lot. Spectre Tenebria at 49.7%. This is actually, I think, a really interesting one because this is the most commonly first pick damage dealer in the format. And the fact that she doesn't even have a 50-50 win rate, just slightly worse than that, suggests to me that people are prioritizing this character a bit too high. And that if this win rate data was publicly available in a game like, say, League of Legends or like Marvel Snap, then people probably would not be as gung-ho on first picking this character because you are perceiving that this character really is that strong. And there's no doubt Spectre is probably the best damage dealer in the game. But when you first pick this character, most of the time, you can see it reflected in the win rate that most people are countering you. You're not even maintaining a 50% win rate if you were first picking Spectre Tenebria. So it's probably not a good strategy to be first picking Spectre Tenebria anymore. The data suggests that it is a slightly losing strategy. So if your goal is to climb, have greater than a 50% win rate, then perhaps maybe first picking Spectre Tenebria really is not the go. Same thing here for first pick Zio. A lot of the speed contest players are trying to take Zio first. At the time, you can see he is the fourth most first pick character, and he has a 47% win rate, which suggests that most people who are playing Zio at the champion or higher rating really are not picking him in the spots that he's best at. And, I know I've been slacking on getting it out there, but you'll see when I do release how to play Zio very shortly that this character is not very good into characters like Unbound Knight Arwell, who is the most common first pick character. This is not a character that is super good into characters like Apocalypse Robbie, who is, seeing an uptick in later parts of the draft. So when you're taking Zio, you really need to be conscious of the fact that if your opponent has a lot of bruisers, has a tank, is very committed to that turn 2 or mid-range standard style, that maybe Zio really isn't the best character for you to be first picking. Again, the data, if it was publicly available, if you could see how often Zio is first pick and you could see it reflected in the win rate, you probably would not be going for him as often. Okay, let's see what other observations are very interesting. Mediator Coeric here, 51.5%. When you compare this to 51.6%, there was a lot of talk amongst the community in the middle part of the season that maybe Hand Guy really wasn't that good anymore, and he started to make a resurgence by the end, and he's exactly as good, just like Apocalypse Robbie, as he has always been. Character is still just the undisputed best or most universally useful cleanser. Speaking of cleansers, Desert Jewel Basar here, 47.9% win rate. That's a lot lower than even I anticipate. I thought this character was very, very good. I can only assume because he is so highly first picked that contributes to his poor win rate overall. But I thought this character was pretty good. That said, Destina here with a 51.4% win rate was my go-to Soul Weaver most of the time because even I noticed that there was a slight increase in my win rate when I was using Destina compared to Desert Jewel Basar because she's a more reliable cleanser. She has the revive. She has the CR push. Better sustain overall for the team, is harder to kill. So unless I really needed that barrier inversion or I was trying to play aggressively with a character like Conqueror Lilius, really wasn't trying to take Desert Jewel Basar. So a lot of other characters that you would expect to be somewhat good had a little bit worse win rates as well. Command Model Leica, 48% win rate. I thought this would be a bit higher. I thought Leica was incredible in the spots that I picked her in, but to be fair, I was not really first picking her. I was picking her like somewhere between like 2 and 4 most of the time. Adventurer Raz at 49.4%. Also seems a bit lower than I would have expected. In the past here, we could see he had 50.8%. I was expecting him to maintain roughly the same level. I guess people just weren't aware of how best to utilize him, which is in that same draft where you're taking like Adventure Raz and like 2 supporters, so that way you can very easily take a strong carry like a Spectre or a Landy in the last spot. So yeah, these are pretty much the other win rates. Like I said, Faithless Litigate 59.8% is also quite surprising, but you can see she has such a high ban rate. So yeah, maybe the games that she's making it through or the spots she's being picked in aren't as good as you would expect. But this is probably one of the most surprising ones to me, because I feel like this character is just really oppressive when she's actually good. So yeah. Crimson Armin, surprisingly, 51.6% win rate as well. Yulha only 49.2%. I had way more success, I feel like, with Yulha than Crimson Armin. I don't think I really played Crimson Armin at all. And I was much more scared of Yulha than I was of Crimson Armin. So yeah. Rimuru here, less than 50%. Still roughly the same here, 49.5%. So nothing has really changed here. Again, though, you can see he's not a really high first pick character. So I think that, again, some of these higher pick characters, he's high enough to be on the top first picks list. But he's more of like a 3-4 character. I feel like his win rate would increase had he actually gotten to be picked lower in the draft than, say, like the top 20. I'm trying to figure out who's actually first picking Rimuru, so that he actually makes it on this list. There's got to be like a surplus of people in like the champion rating that are first picking Rimuru. All right, so you can see here the progress of first picks. At the start of the season, it was Conqueror Lilius, and that's to be expected because she was pretty much the most common first pick in the last season, at the end of last season. So no surprise at the very beginning of this Triumph season that she was the first pick. But even then, you could see Unbound Knight Arwell was being picked very highly, and Zio, because at the time he was very new, so people were trying to test him out. Desert Jewel Basar was one of the most popular picks from the previous season, from the Conquest season. So you can see as you get towards the mid-season, Arwell starts to slightly overtake Conqueror Lilius. Zio gets a more uptick in play, and then Spectre is being first picked, which is where I think we're starting to see Spectre's win rate tank. I should actually scroll back up. Was Spectre Tenebria actually had a worse win rate last season than she did this season? That's actually surprising as well. So yeah, moving up, first picks, like I said, by the end of the season, you see Conqueror Lilius is the preferred pick. Usually at the end of the season, aggressive play is more favored, but Arwell still holding strong here at second place with 15.5%. All right, so now we have picks overall, not just first picks, but picks overall, right? The most picked character throughout the entire season is Unbound Knight Arwell at 56% pick rate, Spectre Tenebria at 51%, Conqueror Lilius at 43%. And then these are mostly the usual suspects, capping it out at the top 10 with Edward Elric. I think the most surprising one here is that Lionheart Cermia is actually picked higher than Apocalypse Ravi. Winter being in the top 20, also pretty surprising. So you can see win rates here haven't really changed. These are just the pick rates in the order. Zio, 47%. Let's see. Zahak at a 47.8% win rate, which kind of lines up with what I was talking about in my counter review. When Zahak is good, he's really, really good, but he's very difficult to use because there's a lot of scenarios where he just like outright gets stomped, and I feel like most people haven't figured that out, and so people will pick him into situations where it's not obvious that he'll perform, and then they end up losing the game. There's so many people I've played against on ladder who pick like Zahak Straze, and they don't have it locked up for sure, like because I have like Conqueror Lilius already, and then I take Zio, and that kind of falls into, their whole game plan falls into shambles. Like they picked Zahak because I had already drafted Aiden, but yeah, again, I feel like people are picking him in the wrong spots. Edward Elric at 50.2% win rate. That's awesome. I really like seeing that because it suggests that Edward is a fair and balanced character. I've heard a lot of people on a lot of streams, a lot of content creators complain about how cheap and or scrubby Edward Elric is. Edward Elric is, from the data, a fairly balanced character. He is a 50% win rate. What else could you ask for? It's not like he's giving you like free win percentage. you're picking him in the spots where he's good and he has a chance to win you the game. That's what he's designed for. The more debuff heavy that the opponent's team comp is, the better Edward Elric actually is. We could also see Bellion here, 54% win rate. This is, I believe, exactly the same as it was last season. Yeah, 54%. So Bellion is still actually the highest win rate character in the game, but you wouldn't know it because she straight up just gets banned most of the time. So yeah, Bellion, probably maybe a slight tweak if they could in the future, just to try to keep the when you consider her high win rate and then the ban rate, that maybe she probably should have some small tweak, but not like a huge amount. You look at Lua when she actually has such a high pre-ban rate is I think a little bit more concerning. Other characters look at here. Landy, really low pick rate. This, I think, is attributed to exactly what I was talking about in my account review. People try and jam Landy on 3 to counter Spectre because Spectre is the number one, most picked character here for DPS. She's the earliest picked DPS most of the time. And they have no real way to deal with something like a counter pick Milam. I mean, I struggled for a while. I knew Landy was the answer, but he didn't know how to safely navigate around the counterplay to Landy because she has an absolute ton of it. So it would seem that the win rate suggests pretty much the same thing. It lines up exactly almost win percentage-wise with Zahak, which is exactly what I was saying. People pick Zahak into situations that they probably shouldn't be picking Zahak into because otherwise he would have a higher win rate. He's very good when he's good, but you can't just jam him every single game. Brywitch Asari at 49% is also pretty surprising. I would have expected this character to be a lot better because this character decided quite a number of games. In the matches I had, she was just really, really insane for me or for my opponent almost every single time. Pretty much right there in line with Faithless Litica. These two, I think, are the most surprising for me. I really would have thought these would have had higher win percentages. Ran at 49.5%. Definitely a decline, as they've mentioned in their notes. I guess another one that's super surprising is iWinter at 43.7% win rate. I had success with iWinter. I thought a lot of other people, a lot of other content creators that I had watched had said that the character was fairly weak. She wasn't super good. And my rebuttal to that was I think people were picking her in spots that she wasn't super good in. So perhaps maybe I was the outlier here. Maybe I just got lucky with iWinter and the games and spots that I was playing her in because 43.7% win rate is a very low win rate. If you've played a game like League of Legends, for example, 43.7% win rate is usually call for like an emergency buff because that means that the character really is not that good at all. So again, I must be the outlier here for the most part. So we could see, reading on with the rest of their notes, Apocalypse Robbie, who had consistently remained at the top of the pick rate, dropped to 12th place in the Triumph season instead. Newly introduced hero Unbound Knight Arwell, as well as existing heroes like Conquerorless and Spectre Tenebria, took the top spots on this list. Adventure Raz, who was a popular pick in previous seasons due to his ability to protect allies, was replaced by Unbound Knight Arwell. Honestly, Unbound Knight Arwell just replaced Fallen Cecilia, like I said. The reason I think Adventure Raz fell out of favor is because, one, Arwell was a better mitigation source, but two, also early hand guy, because you really want Raz hand guy together. It is just not as good as it has been in the past. And Destina kind of replaced Diane. That's because barrier inversion has made it an absolute nightmare to pick Diane in this meta, which is why she's not super, super great. Bruisers like Hua Young, Shu, and Alencia saw a decrease in pick rates, while damage dealers such as Spectre, Tenebria, Savior Aiden, Landy, and Zahak are more commonly picked. And I want to note this here, because Spectre is obviously the most picked character. Savior Aiden was also a very highly picked character. So these are the two safe pick DPS in the formats. Landy beats Spectre, Zahak beats Savior Aiden. And it says here, this next line, these changes may be attributed to the altered battle environment after Hua Young's balance adjustment, which made it easier for damage dealers to be more effective. No, that's not it at all. That's because Spectre Tenebria, again, was the first pick character, and Savior Aiden was the way to deter people from picking Apocalypse Robbie or to deter you from playing Cleave. So, like, this is the strong aggro character to DPS, the safe aggro DPS. This is the safe standard DPS pick. Landy beats the safe aggro pick DPS. Zahak beats the safe pick. Like, it's obvious. Like, if you played in the format, you already know, like, these two are the most common. These two are the answers to it. It has nothing to do with Hua Young getting nerfed. Okay. So we can see at the start of the season, the top 20 picks in the early stage, Unbound Knight Arwal was still the best pick, and that's again because she replaced Fallen Cecilia, who was the previous most commonly picked character. Spectre, 53.3%. Lilius, not too much of a difference there. Savior Aiden, obviously new character. People recognize she's strong, not knowing how to play against her. Counter to the most previous highly picked DPS, which was Apocalypse Robbie. And then Destina, Meteor Quark, so on and so forth. In the middle of the season, we saw Unbound Knight Arwal take a dip, but Spectre Tenebria started to tick up. That's for a lot of aggressive drafters. I would say probably, yeah, around the middle of the season is when I noticed that Spectre was starting to be first picked again, like she has been in the past, because people were doing very degenerate and aggressive things with her. And you could punish people very easily with a character like Zio, depending on how, or Milam, depending on how they actually started to draft against you. By the end here, we can see Spectre doesn't have quite the foothold. She had 52.6% in the middle, now 49.4%. So Unbound Knight ROL kind of closing that gap. I would think now that people hopefully have reflected upon and looked at the win rates, that Unbound Knight ROL and Conquerorless will overtake Spectre Tenebria because they have proven that they are safer first picks for their respective strategies. Yep, so we have, reading their notes again, Spectre Tenebria maintained a high pick rate due to her permanent stealth and skill that does not trigger counterattacks. This makes her an effective choice against popular heroes like Unbound Knight Arwa and Savior Aiden. Decent against Savior Aiden. I guess also decent against Unbound Knight Arwa. Moreover, Spectre Tenebria's versatility allows her to fit into a variety of team compositions, making her one of the top choices for both first pick and general picks. So yeah, that statement, that is true. Spectre Tenebria has unparalleled ability to play in cleave, aggro, and also standard. She is pretty much the most versatile DPS, which is why I think people are taking her first, because they just don't want to have their opponent take it because of how versatile the character is. But again, it opens you up to a lot of stuff. Ran and Sid, who were centerpieces of the speed contesting team composition last season, have lost their dominance due to the increase in counter heroes. Instead, ranger heroes such as Faithless Liquid, Command Model Galika have risen to prominence to be heroes to take the first turn, offering added stability with their stealth abilities. That is correct. That is, Zio made it so that you can't just first pick Sid or Ran like you could in the past. Edward Ulrich had a consistent pick rate amongst collab heroes, whereas iWinner had a high pick rate in the mid-season, and Ikarina made it to the list towards the end of the season. As we can see, scroll up here, Ikarina was the 20th pick overall. Remember how I said she was the MVP in my previous video? As you can see, not everyone really caught on to how strong Ikarina actually was until it was too late or the season was actually wrapping up. She really was the sleeper MVP of the season, and it just took a long time for people to actually realize that. Furthermore, heroes who underwent balance adjustments such as Zahak, Briarwitch, and Remnant Violet became popular picks this season. This indicates that a greater variety of heroes were used overall. Yes, that is correct. Collab heroes, RGBs, specialty changes, and Moonlights all had a pretty fairly consistent pick rate. Like, there was definitely good characters from among each of those four pools. Okay. And then here is basically the win rates at the season close for people across the different leagues. So you can see Global. Global had the second lowest win rate on average amongst Legend players. Asia here has the second most. Japan actually has the highest, which is, largely, I feel like, because only 3 players from Japan made it, one of which was Phantom, who went Hall of Fame. I think that this score is massively inflated because of Phantom and how good he actually is at Epic 7. So, yeah, arguably you could say that Asia server is probably the best server overall, because they have the second highest win rate that's not being propped up by Phantom, and they have about 30% of the actual players. Global still holds a pretty tight grip, though. 50% is really impressive. But again, the lower win rate here, the 59.7% average win rate, suggests that the average quality of the Legend player from Global is not as strong as some of the ones from like Asia or Japan, for example. Moving on to Emperor League, which is where I finished, you can see the average win rate is 53.4%. This is pretty much where I am sure I ended up finishing. My win rate is probably roughly around this. Traditionally in the past, it's been a little bit higher than the average win rate. But yeah, this time I did have a lot of struggles, so I'm not gonna lie. I had a lot of issues going into the last week until I kind of had everything click and kind of rebounded. My win rate was actually probably lower than this for a little bit. So yeah, you can see 53.4%, like I said. Average win rate from last season, 53.7%. So not too much has changed. The quality of the Emperor players are pretty much exactly as they were last season, at least for the global side. They make up about 38 to 40% of the players. Asia server here, 53%. Lower quality, but they hold the second most at 233 players. Korea, similar win rate here. So pretty much looking at all this and looking at the win rate last season, the quality of the Emperor players is exactly the same as it was last time across all servers. They're pretty much exactly the same. Roughly same amount of players from each server, you can see. Like, not much has changed. Like, the quality of the Emperor League players has not changed. When we scroll back up here, looking at the Legend players from the previous season, you can see that Global had a higher win rate, right? And roughly they increased their share of players this time around, but they had a higher win rate in the past, whereas Asia had a little bit less of a win rate. Europe actually, now that I look at it, pretty big increase in win rate. Like, this actually is a pretty big triumph when you look at it. Like, Europe may still be the lowest win rate server, but they massively increased their average win rate, and they put up a lot more players than they did in the past. So that suggests that the European server is actually getting stronger, which is you want to see, because when we look at like the big tournaments like Worlds, for example, Europe is usually lacking a presence, and I would really like to see all of the regions be kind of like similar on equal footing. And like, it would make, I think, just for a better show, better competition overall. League specific data, you can see the number of games played. The average bronze player only plays about 5 games that have finished their placements. That's crazy to me. I guess they're just so turned off from RTA as a format that they stopped playing. Silver is only about 17 games. Even last season's about 17 games. That's also very disappointing. That just must mean that they finished their placements and realized they can't climb any higher, so they just stopped playing. Roughly 55 games or so for gold and masters. So this is like about what people need to get the skin, about 55 games. Once you start to get to challenger, this is where people actually are starting to play the game. You can see it's about 155 games on average, with the average win rate of about 54%, so about 50-50. So if you really want the skin, that's what I'm saying. Like, you only really need to play between like 50 and 150 or so games and maintain a 50% win rate, and you're in there. And, you know, if you need help doing that, by all means, reach out to me on Discord. I have no problems with helping people try to actually accomplish their goals and get the skins for the RTA seasons and things like that. It really isn't that bad. Once you get into the Champion League, though, you can start to see it becomes a massive time commitment. Like, if you're going for Emperor, you're going to be playing quite a lot of games. Average match count for an Emperor player is about 1124. I think my match count was probably, I want to say, around like 800 games. Maybe, was it 600? I think it was 630 something. I said in my video, about 630 games. So I had about half the match count, the average match count for an Emperor player this season. And then Legend is 1365 on average, which is, if you remember, I'm looking back up here, the in Legend here, the average game count here is a lot lower than last season. So yeah, overall, that's everything for the analysis. Let me know down in the comments below, though, what your thoughts were actually on this infographic. I really look forward to these every time they come out, because they provide valuable data and insight and planning going into seasons going forward. Again, things like seeing 47% win rate on Zio suggest that perhaps people are using the character wrong or picking him in spots that they really shouldn't. Same thing with Zahak at like 47.8% win rate. So again, these things are super, super interesting to me. Would love to hear what your thoughts are on everything down below. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch you guys all in the next video. Later now.